friend, I'm so glad you're here today, and whether you're a regular around here or it's your first time clicking on one of my videos, welcome. I'm Amy. I love helping women like you study the Bible with more clarity and confidence using a method I created called the Simple Method. It's something I put together after years of feeling overwhelmed by the Bible study tools that didn't really work with how I learned. So if you've ever opened your Bible and thought, where do I even start? This is for you. So each week we go step by step through a passage or a theme, and I walk you through how I use the simple Bible method to break it down, reflect, and apply it in your real life. So grab your Bible, a notebook, maybe some highlighters, and let's look at this passage together. We're going to be looking over at Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 through 16. So sometimes we do a huge section. One time we did 3 chapters. This time we're doing 4 verses. So it's going to be a really short passage, but I want to show you how flexible the simple method is. You can use it on an entire chapter, on several chapters, on a few verses. So you pick what you're studying and help it and apply it to what you're doing that day. So here's how I'm going to show you to do it on a really short passage. So the reason I picked this passage is this month in over at the site in my Facebook group, we're talking about the theme of goodness. So this whole year we've been talking about the fruit of the Spirit, and the fruit of the Spirit, one of their qualities are goodness. So we're looking into this month, what does the Bible mean about goodness? We teach it to our kids, be good, and those kinds of things. Well, let's get really specific. As full-grown adults, what does it mean to be good? What does the Bible say about goodness, and what can we learn based on Jesus's teachings? So let's go over to Matthew 5, chapter 13, and let's get started. As you'll see, I've already got notes on this page, and that's because we did a study on Matthew chapters 5 through 7. You can see I've got a lot of notes over here because this is the Sermon on the Mount. I've talked about it already. You might have notes filled up right here, and you don't have any room to take, you don't have any space left to take notes on this passage. I do, so I'm going to write right here. But if you don't, you can grab just a sticky note or another piece of paper with some washi tape and put it in your Bible. You can have a separate notebook. I like this illustrating Bible because it has so much room. There's even other Bibles that have a full page called interleavened Bibles. There's a whole bunch of different Bibles I recommend if you're looking for a new one. Over on my website, amycenter.com/faves. And that's where I show you all my favorite Bibling tools and things like that. But for the meantime, if you don't have room, just use a piece of paper. You can also washi tape it in there if you need it on your page as well. So I'm going to zoom on in, and then I'm going to walk you through each step of the simple method for this section, salt and light. So the first thing we're going to do is the first step, which is study. So we have the simple method, which is an acronym, and I'll tell you each step as we go. The first step is study, and what we want to do is study it like we would in school. This one won't be as hard to do because it's real short, but what I usually look for are some kind of context clues to let me know who's talking, what time is this happening, what's the context in relation to the other Bible stories we've read. Maybe highlighting some patterns or repetition if they say the same word over and over, kind of like poetry or emphasis. Sometimes it's good to note that. The other thing is if you come across a word that you don't know, to circle it and look it up later in the next steps. Maybe the link step would be good. That's when we look for context in using other resources to build us on our knowledge of what we're doing. So a Bible dictionary is good to have for that. So look for those unknown words, maybe circle those. And then if you can't find anything at all that you want to highlight, sometimes I go to action phrases. So what are things that either the person listening or the person speaking is supposed to be doing, so that I can see if I can apply that to what I should be doing. So those are some tips for the study step. So we're going to go ahead and grab a highlighter. I usually grab yellow if I'm not color coding stuff, but this time I've already done yellow on this page. So what I'm going to do is I already know that this is going to be talking about two things, salt and light. So I think what I'm going to do is color code this passage, the whole thing, in what's talking about salt and what's talking about light in two different colors. So let's use, I've got these new highlighters that are kind of pastel, but I always love Sharpie highlighters. And I've got those links on my faves page for some tools I like. But I'm going to choose these two colors, and I'm going to do one for salt and one for light. And you pick whatever you want, and then we'll make a little color code on the side to let us know which one we picked. So here we go. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. Okay, so all this is about salt. So I'm going to highlight in that color. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others. They may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Okay, normally I don't highlight everything, but since it's so short, I just want us to see one section's about salt, one section's about light. So what I'm going to do right here is label that. And you can use any color you want. I just happen to have a pink, and I've got a lot of this down here. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab a pink and a purple and take notes on the salt and light in those colors. So this is totally optional, but it's just something I like to do for that extra visual to help me follow what I'm studying. So our next step is illustrate. So far all we've done is highlight, we color coded as we were reading to kind of keep our info straight. And I apologize, I probably shouldn't have picked those colors. It's kind of hard to see this, but luckily it's just a short passage. So I hope you have your Bible out as well. So the step for illustrate is it says you're the salt of the earth, you're the light of the world. There's a lot of visual things happening here. Thinking about food being salted, thinking about when it's no longer useful, that they're going to throw it out and trample it underfoot. Okay, the light of the world is a town built on a hill, can't be hidden. Lighting a lamp and putting it under a bowl, putting on a stand, gives light to everyone in the house. Let your light shine before others. They may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So it gives a lot of examples of things we can doodle and draw. But I think what would be better, instead of drawing every single one of these instances, is picking one symbol to draw for these and then listing out each one of these things that it teaches us about the salt of the earth under our next step, which is map. So let's go ahead and just doodle these right here. The salt of the earth is purple. So I'm going to put that over here using my purple pen. I'm going to label this salt, and then I'm going to draw a salt shaker. And if you're like, I can't draw like that, which really that's a silly doodle, just draw whatever you want to represent salt. And then the other side, I'm going to take that pink and I'm going to put that the pink is representing the light, and I can use whatever I want to do for the light. You could do a candle, you could do a lamp, you could do the sun. Let me do a candle. Let's just do that candle. Okay, and then what we're going to do is move on to this next step, which is map. And this is where I just want us to look through. We're going to read the whole thing again. And every time we learn something about, or we have a phrase that we want to remember, we're going to just write it under here. We're just going to keep it really simple. We're just making 2 columns and we're writing down notes about each one. Okay, so let's start with salt because that was first. It says, you are the salt of the earth. Okay, I think that's important. You are the salt of the earth. If the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. Okay. If salt loses its flavor, so let's just say it in our own words, it's not good for anything. It's no longer useful. So you can phrase that however you want, but I thought that was kind of a good way for me to wrap my mind around what it's saying. And then obviously we're not really talking about salt. This is a metaphor. So we'll dig into that in the personalized section. So let's go to the next section. You are the light of the world. So let's write that right here. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. Okay. So some analogies are town on a hill and a lamp on a stand. In the same way, let your light shine before others versus under a bowl. So let's write that. So that'll give me more insight as well. Let your light shine before others. They may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Let your light shine. Others will see and glorify God. Okay, so all I did was take some notes on these two sections using this as information. Now what do I do with this? How do I understand what it's even talking about? That's not what that step is. That's what the next step is. So we're going to move on to personalize. So some things we could ask ourselves are maybe, what is this analogy it's talking about? This would be a great thing to journal and write down. What is it talking about when it says, let your light shine before others and they will see and glorify God? How are you supposed to let your light shine? What does that mean? Well, and why is it talking about if you put a lamp on a stand, it's going to shine brighter than if you hide it under a bowl? What does that mean for me personally? If I'm the lamp, I've got the light, or if God's the lamp and he's just using me to put a light bulb in and I represent the light, like maybe look, like kind of work through these things as you're journaling. Maybe God represents the lamp, you represent the light, and you are deciding whether you're going to turn on your light or you're going to take that lamp's shade off and make yourself as bright as possible, or if you're going to put a bowl over your light and it's going to be really dark. What does that mean? Well, obviously the light represents your goodness. So what are you showing that others are seeing? So think right now in your life, you might want to pray a prayer of, God, how do you see my light right now? Am I under a bowl? Do I have a really thick lampshade? Do I have a really thin see-through lampshade, or is my lampshade completely off and I am just exposed with light to reflect your glory? So you might think of it like that. You can also visualize that town on a hill. How do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as, like, you know, when you're driving on a road trip and there's nothing for miles and you see there's this gorgeous mansion on top of a hill or a mountain and you just can't stop looking at it because it's just incredible. Or Or are you just kind of driving through the suburbs where everything looks exactly the same, nothing stands out? So use that kind of analogy to assess where you're at in sharing your goodness or reflecting God's light with others, and what that means specifically. What are some things I can do specifically to work towards that goal of being brighter? And then looking at the salt, you can think, okay, I'm the salt of the earth. When salt loses flavor, it's no longer useful. And so you start to think about, okay, I'm going to start journaling about what are the properties of salt? Why would they talk about salt? Why was salt more important then than it is even now? Well, they didn't have, that was its way of preserving food. Right now we have refrigerators, freezers, they didn't have that stuff. And so it served an even greater purpose back then than it does now, rather than us just being like, oh, this tastes better, which is also a great property of salt, but it actually did even more back then before we had the modern conveniences that we have today. So these are great things to journal about. Break down these analogies. What do they mean? Interpret what they mean back then, right now, how you can use this to create some action steps for yourself. Another thing is to pick part of this passage and make it into a memory verse. Write it on a card, put it on a post-it somewhere, have your kids memorize it with you. Just remind yourself, you are the salt of the earth and you are the light of the world. So once you've broken down what that means, those phrases have power behind them when you start repeating them to yourself all the time. You're in a situation, you remind yourself, I need to be the light of the world. I need to be the salt of the earth right now. What is that going to look like? And so let's move on to the next step, which is link. So those things I talked about in link, this is where you're going to kind of get some extra information. So everything you've gathered from here that you could figure out on your own, go deeper, see what other people have figured out, find out those resources that are helpful. I don't think I saw a word that I didn't really understand what it meant, but now would be a good time to circle a word and look it up in a Bible dictionary. I'm not really seeing a word on this one, so I'm going to look down at my other resource, which is footnotes. And so when you have a Bible, even ones that aren't study Bibles, most of them will have footnotes down at the bottom. And that's just extra references to other verses that it may be quoting that have already been said before, or what a word interpreted might also be interpreted as, since this was not written in English. It's been interpreted. And then also you can compare translations. So for example, this is an NIV. I could also pull out an ESV. I could pull out the Message or a paraphrase version. You could also go to the King James Version. So there's lots of different, I have another video about why the different translations. And so sometimes it's good to take the 4 different types of translations and lay them out side by side and see what's different, what's the same, what words pop up. And so that gives you more insight. So let's see. I don't know if any of the footnotes are on this. It says verse 21, the footnotes start, and we only go to verse 16. So there is no footnote on that, but that's always a great resource. Don't skip that in your Bible. The other thing that you can do is look up those questions you have. So you could even just Google, what was salt used for before refrigerators? Or show me pictures of different kinds of lights. And so just looking at images of those can give you more powerful insights and stuff. So just using your brain to come up with different things to look into. And then of course I always have my cheat sheets that I recommend, which I wanted to let you know that since coming up with my simple method, I'm transitioning all of my products to reflect that wording. So this is my simple method that I teach on everything, and I've been calling them my Bible cheat sheets. And I want you to know that if you're seeing different wording over on my site, it's because I'm transitioning to the new wording. I'm calling them, instead of my Bible cheat sheets, they're my simple Bible notes. So basically, I took notes on every book of the Bible using this method. So these kinds of visuals that you see are the kinds of visuals you'll see in those notes. So it's the same exact pages. The Bible cheat sheets have not changed. just the name has changed. And so I'm trying to roll that out. They're just called Simple Bible Notes. So let me give you an example of the Matthew notes that you can look at to get some more information. And basically what these are is I did all this research and then I wrote down all my notes and I put it in one nice organized format for you to look at, so you didn't have to do all the research on your own. You could build on my research. So here we go. I'm going to show you real quick. This is something that I've bound by myself. I don't have this in book form, but I have a really big announcement to tell you in a minute. But this, you can't, you just print these papers. I don't have it bound for you. I just got this bound at Staples. But when I worked on the book of Matthew, here's some background stuff that will help you out. Understanding that Matthew talks about the genealogy to Jesus, so you can figure out real quick, what did Adam have to do with Jesus? What was the relationship to the Old Testament to get to the New Testament? Who were the 12 apostles? Lots of information in here. And then I've got other things on the other Gospels, which are retellings of the same story. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all tell the same thing. So on each one of those pages, I added different information. I didn't just repeat the information. And what this section is about is Jesus's topic on the Sermon on the Mount. This is one of the topics about the salt and light. So you can kind of see some of the other things that I put in here about the topics, and you'll see that under the topic of sharing the good news with others, it's talking about the salt of the earth and the light of the world. And that will kind of help you understand what the other topics are in the Sermon on the Mount that he talks about right before and right after in relation to everything that the Bible is talking about. So right now you can grab these pages. There's either 1 or 2 pages of notes on each book, depending on how long the book is. So those shorter books like Hosea, they're going to get 1 page of notes, but longer books like most of the books like Luke, they're going to have 2 pages of notes. So what I did was I created these one at a time, and I was selling them as digital printables. And so when I got the whole set together, then you could bundle all of them. And then I discounted it based on how much they were individually to get the whole set. So that's been my bestseller over on my shop. Now the problem I'm running into a lot is I love printing things. So even though a lot of my stuff is digital, obviously I want to show you the printed version of this when I'm doing a video or when I'm sitting with my Bible. And so the digital is great if you're on the go or you're teaching a class, all those kinds of things. If you like to take digital notes, the digital version is still really helpful, and it's good because you can print it, so you can make that hard copy. Now the downside is a lot of people are saying, I don't have a printer. I would love to have this in book form. And so what I've done is I am working on turning all of these cheat sheets into books. So I've got my Women of the Bible book that I came out with this year, and that's the Women of the Old Testament. And that used my simple method to make those notes. And so I'm creating my simple guide to the Old Testament. So right now I'm going to be doing all of these Old Testament pages into a book. And then next year I'll do all the New Testament pages into a separate book. So they'll be called the Simple Guide to the Old Testament and the Simple Guide to the New Testament. It's going to be gorgeous. I'm going to update and revise everything in there. Kind of clean up some of the images that just I made this 6 years ago, and I'd love to just give it a fresh look. And also one thing I've really been wanting for this is an index, because sometimes I'm like, oh, there's a character I'm reading about, but I can't remember what page I took notes on him about. So I'm going to be creating a really extensive index, just like I've got in the Women of the Bible book. And that way you can look up in the index, it'll tell you which page to flip over. And I also will be throwing in some extra resources not available in the current cheat sheets right now. So there'll be extra things like extra timelines and genealogies and maps and that index and table of contents to keep it really organized. Of course, it'll all be updated and revised in a beautiful new format. So I'm so excited. These cheat sheets are not going anywhere. They're still available digitally. But if you've been holding your breath for a physical version, it is on the way. So right now I've got a wait list that you can join for the Old Testament guide, the simple Guide to the Old Testament. That book is coming out this fall. So grab the waitlist, go to that waitlist page and get on the list. What that's going to do is give you first dibs to buy the book, to pre-order the book. And when you pre-order, you'll get some digital bonuses that I'll send you to your email. Plus, I'm going to give you free shipping. So that link is in the show notes. Go ahead and get on that wait list. You're not committed to buying anything. It just makes sure that you get an email with those perks that nobody else will get if they're not on the list. So Old Guide to the Old Testament is coming out this fall. And then next year, I will have that guide to the New Testament as well. I'm so excited for my digital pages to become physical books. It's something I've wanted to do for a really long time. And then, of course, with the movement of AI, my digital things are being reproduced and resold without my permission constantly. So I am so excited that people are getting into the word and they're excited about it. But unfortunately, you get those copycat AI generated infringing kind of sites that happen with digital stuff. So always make sure that my name is on it. If the website doesn't have my name in it or the paper that you're looking at doesn't have my name on it, it's not from me. So I'm not saying everyone is lying about the information on it, but if people are plugging things into ChatGPT, ChatGPT doesn't necessarily provide all the right information. And so I just want to let you know that I very much hand draw everything. I research everything. I have people on my team that I pass off my information to, and they check it out on their own using their Bibles and make sure everything is being researched with other Bible teachers. And so we do our best to make it as accurate as possible without using those kind of technology cheats. We want to use that as a supplement and not as the basis of our research. So thank you so much for supporting me all these years. I'm really excited to hear all this feedback from you guys and finally give you what you've been asking for, which is that physical version of these cheat sheets, now called the Simple Bible Notes. So our very last step that we're going to is expand. And that just means keep going, make a plan for what you're going to do next. I have some study plans over on my website that you can follow if you don't have something you're doing consistently every day. I've got lots of ideas for you over there. The other thing you could do is just try the simple method on the next section or the next chapter. But just make a plan for what you're going to do. Expand just means keep going and dig more into that quality versus quantity. We don't want to be motivated by just checking off the box. We want to actually get something out of our time that's transforming us. So I'm so proud of you for being in the Word and taking this time to learn more about God and who He calls you to be. And thank you so much for joining me today. My hope is that every one of these videos gives you a practical way to stay consistent in the Word and really connect with what you're reading. So if you want to try the simple method in your own quiet time, I've got free tools, journaling pages, a lot of Bible study resources over at amycenter.com. And I've created a full guide to walk you through each step in detail over at amycenter.com/simple. So if you're more interested in let's just dig into what you just went over, you want a free cheat sheet to go through it, that's where you're going to head. So I'd love to hear what you got out of today's study. So go ahead and leave a comment below if something stood out to you. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you want to keep walking through the Bible with me each week. Keep showing up even on these messy days. You're doing so much better than you think. See you next week.